So the blue wave gets stronger and stronger, so the need to lie about the election gets stronger and stronger. Donald Trump said the other day, apparently, that people were using disguises to vote. And here is Lou Dobbs trying to stay in the mix with some more lies about immigration and voting on Fox News, Fox Business.
Well, we're watching, millions of illegal immigrants cross our borders, and many of them voting in the past election. That's what was just a couple of weeks ago, and having an immense impact. If there are, as Yale and MIT say, 20 to 30 million illegal immigrants already in this country, you know what that means for the districts of the U.S. Congress and the influence that they're giving to, for example, the state of California, Illinois, New York. But New York has such an
the burden on our
migration,
economy.
it's not going to have much effect.
So that's, of course, wrong. And the census and populations and people's ability to vote are based on people who've gotten their paperwork and so on. At least your ability to vote certainly is based on your paperwork. Also, in addition to that, there has been literally a handful of documented voter fraud cases in the modern era. There are probably more cases that happened a couple years ago. There was this whole little mini controversy in New York of underage Hasidim voting in a district in Williamsburg, just like walking in like, yeah, I'm here to vote. That specific case, which drew a few eyebrows, that had more attempted documented cases of voter frauds in one borough than have happened nationally. So it's all a lie. But this is the lie that is driving a truth, which is that Republicans need to ethnically cleanse and ethnically engineer a landscape for a oligarch white identity party. And that's who Lou Dobbs is, that's what Fox is, and that's what Trump is.
David Roth had this, at David_J_Roth on Twitter, said about this clip. Beyond the basic, it's wrong to lie, and also extremely racist aspects, all of which are obviously not great.
Right.
This is basically elder abuse by proxy. It's fucked up to lie to people like this for any reason. Like this mass scale lying is doing significant damage. And this is why I occasionally get in arguments with people, especially in the chat, about how like we criticize Jimmy Dore, but we don't criticize voters specifically for like a lot of, I think, really important reasons. And it's because we have this is the political education of this country.
Yep.
Right. And it makes me so angry. Like this is why I studied media in college. It's because like, how does so many people around me pass around like emails making fun of Al Gore as the science continues to get more and more solid on climate change, right?
Right.
Like it's
and it's not just people are stupid.
It's a
people
nightmare.
Are subjected to massive, sustained, and in some cases extremely sophisticated propaganda campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's actually get. I mean, we'll dunk on PodSave a little bit, but one of the things that's really important to look at in the Facebook story, and obviously the big takeaways we already sort of touched on, which is that Facebook actively suppressed the release of information. Sheryl Sandberg is, in fact, abusive to employees and then throws them under the bus, and at no step in the process had any concern about the actual problems with what Facebook was doing.
She shouldn't have another leadership role for the rest of her life.
She shouldn't have another leadership role for the rest of her life, to say the least. She should be doing public penance for and working to nationalize and break up the monopolies of Silicon Valley companies if she had an ounce of integrity, which she seems clearly not to have. But and also this spin that they're just a platform and not a media publisher. You know, they're a media publisher when they're juking statistics and manipulating algorithms, which have major effects for people's jobs. You know, when they sort of amplify a certain type of news story and fake statistics on it, people get hired. And then they get fired when Facebook admits they're manipulating statistics. And then when they say it's all about video and it's all about streaming, and then they lie about those statistics, that translates to people get hired for positions and then are fired because they're literally getting hired on fake and misleading analytics. And that, of course, leads to a bigger problem in this country, which is the belief in numbersism and solutionism and the fact that there is some sort of objective, quantifiable thing, particularly when you're talking about business. You're almost never. There's always a presupposition that goes into them. And of course, the presupposition for a private enterprise is going to be a presupposition that's profitable and self-advancing for that enterprise. In the article, when they talked about whether or not Trump was violating the terms of service for lying and hate speech, he certainly was. Now, it's a hard question, of course, for a leading presidential candidate. And how do you do that on a media platform? I'm not saying there isn't difficulties there, but the pivot they made to we're just a platform. You can do anything on here, belies all of their micro controls of people's personal, practices. That belies the fact that they've teamed up with right-wing think tanks in ways that have implicated even, sites like Telesur, which, of course, just like Al Jazeera and so on, they have government backing from some states in Latin America, but they produce real and important and frankly vital coverage on Latin America right now. And of course, a right-oriented think tank in Washington, D.C. is going to target Telesur. While they've not gotten their act together in the United States, they had weeks in Brazil where WhatsApp, which they owned, there was slush funds of money going into spreading fake news and lies about the Workers' Party in Brazil. Facebook shut that down in the last week of the campaign. And for what it's worth, that was when the polls started to close slightly. But when you look at the work that Definer Strategies did with Facebook, this is how content gets seeded. You set up a fake website or some type of website that you say is some type of public clearinghouse of information in Silicon Valley. You have people who work at these firms writing blog posts that get picked up by Breitbart, as an example. And when you get into that ecosystem, particularly when you get into coverage of either specialized, industries or general information, you either have straight up PR and propaganda getting recycled by other outlets, or as in the case of my friend Luke Mayville, who just had this great success of expanding Medicaid in Idaho, he'll say, yeah, like in local news places, a lot of reporters rely on press releases from things like the Koch brothers because sometimes these numbers are complicated. Sometimes they don't have the resources to really follow up on things. And so they, go with the flow. And so it's just my point being that even the conversation of whether or not you believe in quote unquote facts or not, in reality is so much more complicated by a sustained and relentless propaganda agenda, which implicates everything from PR firms to even scientific research itself. And so, yeah, it's not about blaming people for not being intelligent enough. It's about really understanding how these things actually operate.